Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jack Jedwab. I'm the President and CEO of the Association for Canadian Studies and the Metropolis Institute, and I have the great pleasure and privilege to introduce the speakers for our presentation today, which is on AI and chat use lessons learned. We're going to begin by hearing from the esteemed Wendy Cukier, my dear colleague, who is the founder and academic director of the Diversity Institute and a professor of entrepreneurship and innovation at Toronto Metropolitan University. I suspect that if you've been to any of our conferences or events or webinars, that Wendy is a known entity to all of you. But the introduction is always important. So thank you so much, Wendy, not only for your friendship and your participation, but also for supporting this research via the Future Skills Initiative project and the Diversity Institute. And also, you'll hear from me. Actually, I'll follow up with some additional insights on the research after Wendy's rather thorough presentation. And then we'll hear from Ines Ghozzi. Thank you, Ines. Merci pour participer. Ines is the director of Action Interculturelle based in Ottawa. And so we'll hear from her thoughts on what we hope is the beginning of more discussion, conversation about a topic that will most certainly be an area of interest and preoccupation for us, our colleagues, and for future generations. So with that said, avec ceci dit, j'invite Wendy à faire sa présentation. I invite Wendy to begin the presentation. And thanks to all of you again for participating in the webinar.
Thanks so much, Jack, and it's a pleasure to be here. I should note that I'm joining you from the traditional territory of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, and the Wendat peoples. And many of you know the university that I work at, Toronto Metropolitan University, changed its name as part of its commitment to truth and reconciliation. So I'm going to set us off and talk a little bit about the study, how overall AI usage appeared, in particular with respect to differences between immigrants and non-immigrants, and the use of AI language and translation. And then I'll turn it over to Jack to talk more about some of the interesting findings. So this was a web-based survey. It was conducted just a few months ago. There were 1,700 respondents. It was a representative sample of 1,500. And then we added in, we oversampled people with an immigration background. And Léger conducted it. Association of Canadian Studies led this in collaboration with us, and the Future Skills Centre funded it. Nothing we present it necessarily reflects the opinions of the Government of Canada. So I just wanted to start off because a lot of the work we do at the Future Skills Centre really focuses on AI. And one of the things we've learned is people have very different understandings of what AI is or what AI is not. I've worked in IT for many, many years, and expert systems have been around for at least 30. So AI itself is not new, but what is quite new are the applications around generative AI, which this survey focuses on. And it's worth noting that the developments in the workplace are accelerating at a pace many of us can hardly keep up with. I mean, McKinsey just noted that its firm has 40,000 humans and 20,000 agents, which are basically AI combinations of AI functions that can do repetitive work, and they're expecting to reach parity within 18 months. Well, you can bet that it's not because they're going to just increase the number of AI agents. And so when people talk about jobs that are safe and jobs that are at risk, my response is actually to suggest that all jobs are currently at risk. It's just a matter of how quickly and where we see technology adopted. One of the things, for example, people often talk about are safe jobs, those that involve physical labor, for example. And so I also wanted to flag some of the work we're doing around physical AI because increasingly robotics and sensors and AI are being used in ways that nobody anticipated. Up on the top right is my next husband, a robot who does housekeeping and stacks the dishes. But we're also seeing robots in construction that can, for example, lay the bricks for an entire house in a day. And this is a study done by Stats Canada, which really just focused on AI in particular functions of businesses, particularly around operations. And what you can see is the pace is accelerating very rapidly. So this particular study focused on asking questions around how people are using AI tools, particularly focused on things like ChatGPT and Copilot. And the question here was how often are people using it? And you can see that there's a huge difference between, for example, 18 to 24-year-olds and folks in of my vintage. I will allow you to guess what that might be. So age is definitely one of the dimensions. We see gender differences as well. And one of the things this study was designed to do was to look at differences for people born in Canada or people who are newcomers or are longer term immigrants. And so, one of the things that I think is really important to note is that when we compare people with Canadian nationality versus, for example, people who identify as newcomers, newcomers are almost 50% more likely to say that they use ChatGPT or they use AI tools on a regular basis. So it's very important to recognize that many immigrants coming to Canada are using these tools much more than people born in Canada. And we see that often they're using them to support interactions with people who speak a different language. We're particularly interested in the applications of these tools in the context of translation and help navigating systems. So when we ask the question about people's perceptions of using AI for translation, what's interesting is many felt that translation was actually supporting or enhancing their language learning rather than undermining it. And you can see that in that the agreement is much higher than the disagreement about how AI supports understanding one of the official languages and supports language learning. One of the other studies we've done, for instance, looks at the application of AI in language training. And I would argue that this is something that is underexplored and underutilized. So when you look at people with whose language is neither English nor French, you can see that they use it more than others. Francophones tend to use it a bit more than Anglophones. When we ask about confidence, what's interesting to note is that many people indicate that AI translation increases people's confidence in communicating. We see this particularly when it comes to written communications, where many people use it either to generate responses or to clean up their English. When we look at the extent to which people have had formal language training, it's clearly more common with younger people. And when we see people who have had more formal training who are outside of the official languages, we also see there is a high propensity. We also note that many Canadians feel that AI translation actually improves their job performance, reduces misunderstandings at work, and almost a third feel that without AI tools, they would face more barriers at work. And this is really, really important, I think, for those of us who are focused on creating inclusive work environments. We also see that a majority of Canadians feel that AI translation helps remove language barriers overall, improves language skills, and many believe it improves vocabulary. And this is somewhat contrary to um, claims that are often made that the use of AI will undermine people's language skills. Um, People whose first language is not English or French are most likely to agree that AI translation helps remove language barriers overall. Francophones are also inclined to indicate that it improves their language skills. And the frequency of AI use seems to be a predictor to the view that um, remote work increases access to job opportunities. For those working in hybrid or fully remote jobs, as well as those interacting outside their language group, we see that there's more receptiveness to remote work opportunities. And we see, interestingly, the youngest and the oldest cohorts are most likely to trust human translation more than AI. And this is something Jack will talk about more, which is something that may surprise many people, which is younger people are not necessarily all in on AI any more than senior citizens are. So what you can see in this graph, the people who are most likely to trust AI are in the sort of 35 to 44 age range, and it's a U-shaped curve. Uh, as well, if we look at uh, how people compare human translation to AI-enabled translation, we see that trust is significantly increasing for in the group. Sorry, that we almost have parity between the people who trust both equally and the people more inclined to trust human translation. When we look at trusting AI translation for entertainment and more social activities, we can see it's much higher than, for example, for translation in very technical or legal situations. And we also see, interestingly, French Canadians are more likely than others to trust AI for translation in entertainment than other situations, perhaps because they're accustomed to working with subtitles. We see, however, as well that a lot of Canadians acknowledge that AI sometimes produces translations that are confusing. Many people are aware of the problems with hallucinations and so on. And again, what is interesting is younger people who are among the heavier users of AI are more likely to note these challenges. So with that, I will hand it over to Jack and I will um, function as the slide advancer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Away we go. Let's see the next slide. Uh, as you can see here, we've been looking at what the sort of feelings are about the use of ChatGPT. But before I get into that more deeply, here's the settings in which it gets used more often. As you can see here, it's used least often in in-person work settings. Not surprisingly, it's used more often in hybrid and fully remote settings. As regards the degree to which people across the educational attainment spectrum are using it, you can see there's a significant gap in terms of its use by university students versus its use by college or elementary or high school graduates, rather, as opposed to students. Finally, its use is far more extensive in the situational sort of column in schools as opposed to in the workplace and or other settings. Next. So amongst Canadians using ChatGPT or similar, about 28% say it does most of the work. Another 20% say it does half the work. Now, that's going to be something that individuals will evaluate in terms, I suppose, of what their own sense of what almost all the work or some of the work implies. But you can see that to the extent to which they're admitting the degree of work that is being undertaken by AI, about 1 in 4 are saying it does most of the work. Another 1 in 5 or thereabouts are saying it contributes equally. Those percentages are varying, but not extensively across the age spectrum, right? You could see in the 18 to 24 cohort that near 30% are saying that it's doing most of the work. 75 plus amongst those using it, because it's amongst users, about nearly 1 in 4 saying it's doing most of the work. So there's some interesting variations across that age spectrum in terms of the extent to which people perceive or assess that it's doing most of the work. Now, again, it's an assessment, and some of this will depend on your personal comfort with making such admissions and what you consider to be most of the work or all of the work. Next. Now, as regards what generative AI is producing in terms of a final answer, and whether most Canadians think that in doing so, it's cheating, that feeling is especially present amongst the younger cohort. So in the 18 to 24 group, 34% say that being asked the extent to which they consider the following use of ChatGPT to be cheating. If it's generating ideas only, that's the sort of the 1 in 4 think that. If it's editing or improving your work, another 1 in 4 think that's the case. If it's producing part of the final answer, 51% think that's the case. If it's producing most of the final answer, 64% think that's the case. So very interesting there again, and requires probably a fair bit of research. Now, just a quick sort of editorial comment. A lot of this, and we're increasingly seeing this way of unpacking or understanding this, is based on the sort of binary view of the use of chat or copilot or other equivalents, right? Binary as in the human versus AI, right? Which I suspect a lot of us are right now, to the extent we're using it and the degree to which that's happening, are debating whether it's us or it that is really doing the work, and at what point is the line one that is being sort of crossed over into the more of it's being done by it as opposed to being done by us, in that sort of binary way of looking at things. And the challenge probably going forward is to figure out how this isn't a binary way of operating or thinking, which is not simple, right? So when I use when my colleagues use chat for similar AI at work or school, I acknowledge I'm using it now. 32% of people acknowledge they're using it. It's extensively more acknowledged in the 45 and under cohort, that is 1 in 4, as opposed to 45 and over, where there's less such acknowledgement. There's a high rate of people who say they don't know if that's happening or not. I actually put the question to AI itself to see whether it could estimate the extent to which people were acknowledging it, and it came up with similar figures to what our poll is showing. Actually, Wendy, they may have used our poll to establish the figure, because I couldn't track where they got this information. But we do know that it's in these polls, there's a social desirability consideration in lots of survey work. And I would suggest here there's a very strong degree of sensitivity about such acknowledgement, because looking at a lot of the work that sort of comes by at least my desk or area, or in some broader context, I don't see a lot of acknowledging, right? So of whether it's AI or not. And it looks like very few people are using it, if acknowledgement is the barometer for measuring the extent to which it's being used. So, but all these things circle back to some of the earlier slides and what they're saying about people's perceptions about who's doing most of the work or not, in terms of whether they think it needs to be acknowledged or not. Areas where future sort of research is I think needed quite badly and quite soon. Now, on the issue of when using ChatGPT or similar, should users be required to disclose doing that? As regards schoolwork assignments, 75% feel that it should be disclosed. Not much difference across that age spectrum. And similarly, as regards work-related tasks, it's a lower for the under 45 group, but still majorities feel that it's that users should be required to disclose the use of it. And then we get back into the previous slides. Is it being disclosed? I don't think we can, despite what we are offering as one of the more detailed sort of presentations or data analysis of the issue. We need to unpack this a lot more to really get at how it's being used and those interconnections between admission of use, disclosure, and so forth. Probably need a lot more qualitative work in this area if I'm going to sort of be fair about what the requirements would be to really unpack this further. Again, if we think this is important. 1 in 5 can't say they know someone. So the test there was, I did this the subsequent supplementary question. Very often people will say, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing anything wrong here, but someone else is. And so here what you see is that particularly amongst that young cohort, 54% are saying that they personally know someone whose use of ChatGPT they consider to be cheating. Again, I circle back, unpack this thing further. It's not well aligned with what they're saying in that cohort about admissions of or degrees to which individuals are sort of using this inappropriately, which by inappropriate I mean cheating. So again, it only suggests we further that social desirability issue or the issue of stigma, right? That's being attached to those who are using it is something that needs further investigation. And as I said, maybe it's qualitative work that needs to be done. Again, based on how important we feel knowing this is. I actually am in the school. I think Wendy would be in Ines as well. That it is important to get more information about what's happening here and what's not. 1 in 3 Canadians trust the accuracy of AI most of the time. Another third, half the time. Trust is highest in the 18 to 24 cohort. 80% say they trust it at least half the time. So there's a significant degree of trust in the accuracy of the information provided. Now, again, that seems to run a bit counterintuitive to what we're saying elsewhere. We trust humans more when it comes to translation, but we have a high degree of trust. So I think the trust thing can vary. And again, we'll need to better understand the sort of variability of trust if we're going to do a fuller sort of analysis of what is really happening here. Next. Great job, Wendy, by the way, just to let you know on the slides. Terrific. 1 in 3 Canadians say they're becoming increasingly more dependent on AI. My sense is that, and you can see the cohort difference is really, really critical here. 52%, a majority of 18-24 are becoming more dependent. Now, they're not acknowledging much more dependence, but when you look at somewhat more dependent and accumulate that with much more dependent, we're at that 52%, very different across that cohort, suggesting that as we go forward, there'll be increasing degrees of dependence. And again, my sense is that the dependency rate is probably higher than people are willing to acknowledge based on the trend line, right? So what was 52% when we did this survey 2 months ago, at the rate we're seeing change is probably 54% as we're speaking. It's changing very, very quickly. Next. That's the purpose of this, of the companies who are sort of developing and generating this, is to get us more dependent on it. Right? So my sense is they're probably succeeding well, given what the market looks like right now for those companies. Now, most Canadians believe, as regards, sorry, no, go back one, sorry. Yes. So as to whether the rules are clear, how clear do you think current rules are regarding its use? Again, those younger cohorts are much more likely to think that the rules are clear at 45% in the 18 to 24 cohort. 1 in 5 overall are saying that's the case. It's much lower as we sort of look across the age spectrum. Higher rates of people say they don't know, but still much higher rates of people on those older cohorts, especially in the 35 plus range, that are saying it's very unclear, which is not what's being said amongst those younger cohorts to any meaningful degree. So there's a very, very large gap in terms of the extent to which people there's clarity. Next. How am I doing? Okay, another few minutes. I think I can do it. The majority of Canadians think that AI generates both benefits and risks, right? So in general, people are seeing both. Their sort of go-to answer on this is in the sort of, as I said, binary way of seeing this. It's us versus it, right? I didn't say us versus them, right? I didn't classify it as a them. Right now it's an it. It may be a them. Actually, we'll have to see how things evolve. But in that us versus it framework, people are seeing both positives and negatives, right? The younger cohort, that is, again, we see that 45 plus is less inclined to say mostly beneficial than the 45 and under. There's interesting variation on these questions across that generational sort of spectrum. Sometimes it's 35 and under, sometimes it's 45 and under. So things are certainly happening that are also quite interesting in that 35 to 44 cohort, very much centered in that workspace in terms of how they're unpacking this. And so age is a very important predictor, as we've seen both here and previously, in terms of how people are seeing this. And the trend lines are fairly predictable, right? Based on the way in which the age breakdowns are sharing their perspective with us. The mostly harmful is actually, less than 1 in 5. Now, sorry, go ahead, next. I'm going to try to move fast to wrap up so we can hear from Ines and take the questions. Now we tried a bit of some of the crosstabs, look a bit more deeply at what this is telling us, and we can see that when as regards disclosure, people who feel AI does most of the work as opposed to those who feel it does all the work are less inclined to feel that there's a need for disclosure. So interesting. The people who feel it does all the work feel it more disclosure necessary. That's actually very intuitive, right? Not surprising at all. And then we look across the spectrum. If so it's really in that AI does almost all the work where the feeling about disclosure is much stronger. But even those who do minimal AI feel there's need for disclosure. So there's a broad consensus of need for disclosure. Where the big gap is the degree to which people feel there needs to be disclosure and the actual degree of disclosure. I think a lot of people feel, yes, there needs to be disclosure, but they want someone else to do that, not them. They don't mean it. It doesn't apply to them. It applies to someone else. The people who are cheating, not them. So again, degree of use of AI has little impact on opinion about disclosure, right? So there's just a general feeling about disclosure. The disclosure it's one of those value-laden type of things. Yes, we should disclose. So that's what we're seeing. Next. Is that it? No. Do you personally know someone who's is that no? So we're continuing. Do you personally know someone who used ChatGPT or similar AI tools you consider to be cheating? Again, as I said earlier, that was the crosstab with the extent to which people perceive that the percent which people are sort of parsing the division of work in terms of AI. Again, some differences. If you do almost all of the work, then 14% are saying that they feel there should be that's cheating. The less you use AI, the more you feel people are cheating that are using it. So which doesn't it's aligned with what you hear in conversations from people. So when it comes to editing or improving your work, amongst those for whom AI does all the work, some 1 in 3 regard as either definitely or probably cheating. So there's all kinds of opinion about cheating and all kinds of variation about it, depending on how much work you feel it is doing or you're doing or others are doing. But my general sense is that we think someone else is cheating, even if, and we're not understanding fully the distinctions between where editing, which is an interesting issue. You have something edited, you may think it's changing the sort of not the content, but the way it's been written. But actually editing often, as we know full well, does impact the content, right? So there's a gray zone there, and people are trying to come to grips with the gray zone. So naturally, I think their inclination in terms of some of these value-laden notions of disclosure, cheating, people will think cheating is bad. So, we need to respond accordingly. Disclosure is good, so we need to respond accordingly. But, the dialectic between the two isn't always you sort of contributing to a real logical way of unpacking this thing. Next. Are we okay? Where AI produces the final answer, some 69% feel it's definitely or probably cheating, right? So, but not everyone does. Not everyone feels it's cheating, even when it's producing the final answer. So we can see some, again, incongruity here in terms of how we're coming to terms with this or not coming to terms with this. And somewhere we need to provide guidance as to where the line is drawn or not. And I would say that's probably the big takeaway from this. I'm going to try to go faster, Wendy. Benefits of AI, greater use of AI results. So there are widely perceived benefits for amongst AI, and the more you feel it's beneficial, the more the frequency of its use is. So the greater users are feeling it's more beneficial. The more you use it, the more you see the benefits. The less you use it, the less you see the benefits. Overall, how we describe it. Okay, continue. Those who use AI most beneficial. Next, how are we doing? Oh, two left. To go next, let's do the next one. Let's skip to the those who see AI as most beneficial. Again, most likely that the rules are using it are clear. So the more benefits, more you see it as beneficial, the more positive you're seeing it overall. You're probably getting a little less sort of anxious about disclosure issues, probably feeling less that it's cheating as you use it because you begin to take ownership, right? Now, the real question is: are you taking ownership over it, or is it taking ownership over you? Right? That's what we need to better understand. So I'll leave it there. Thanks, Wendy. Let me thank you again. I know I've thanked you many times for different things, but thanks so much for supporting this research. It's as you know, I, and Ines and many others, we've done research on a lot of very interesting things across a broad spectrum of topics. But if I may, this is one of the more interesting topics that I've worked on, and it raises so many fascinating research questions and really a lot of existential questions about who we are as humans. So with that, hope I haven't taken too much time, Ines, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Wendy. You've shown us where AI stands in Canada today through the survey result, and it's really great to see all those precise indicative numbers. Now, I would like to take the conversation into maybe a different perspective. So at Action Interculturelle Canada, we work every day with newcomers and communities across the country, and what we observe on the ground gives definitely meaning to the numbers you've shared with us. My question at this point today is not simply how many Canadians are using AI and how they feel about it, but it's also what may these trends be telling us about tomorrow. So allow me to share my screen with everyone, and please, can you see my shared screen at this point? Partager.
Wait, but no.
Perfect. Thank you. So the survey tells us something very important, right? Artificial intelligence is no longer a technology that belongs only to researchers or large companies. It's becoming part of everyday life for all Canadians, right? So what really jumps out to me is that AI is becoming part of every Canadian's life. So 45% of Canadians use AI every week, and almost 60% among Canadians under 40. So AI is no longer emerging, it's becoming the norm. It is like the internet 20 years ago. We are moving from experimentation to everyday use. One statistic particularly caught my attention is that 77% of newcomers already use AI. For me, this is much more than a technology statistics. It's an inclusion statistic, because for many newcomers, AI helps remove barriers that once seemed impossible to overcome. It helps people participate more fully into the Canadian society. So at Action Interculturelle Canada, we see this every day. People use AI to translate documents, to prepare for job interviews, to better understand Canadian institutions, to improve their communication, and perhaps most importantly, to gain confidence. Sometimes we think AI is replacing people. What we most often see on the field is that AI is helping people participate more confidentially in the society. So when we observe these experiences, we notice something interesting. People don't stop asking AI for information. Their relationship evolves. Information becomes communication communication becomes productivity, productivity builds confidence, and confidence gradually becomes trust. That progression may be one of the most important changes happening today. So EI is becoming many things. As we said, it becomes a translator, it becomes a tutor, it becomes a career advisor, a coach, and sometimes even a companion. That last point is especially important because when technology moves from solving problems to influencing relationship, the conversation changes completely. The survey tells us that 43% of respondents say AI increased their confidence when communicating. That definitely matters because confidence changes behavior. Confidence encourages participation. Participation creates belonging, and belonging is one of the foundations of successful inclusion. So EI is no longer only helping us perform tasks, it's increasingly helping shape how we learn, connect, and build trust. Oh, sorry. So through history, trust has been built through families, I'm sorry, am I recently? Yeah, so sorry. So through history, trust has been built through families, teachers, friend, and public institution. And today, EI, I'm losing the, sorry. So I'm sorry, I lost the track of the slides. So a new question is emerging in the recent research that we can find online is also that teenagers are regularly using EA companion, such as Character EI or My EI, and 28% uses them as virtual companions. Meanwhile, 60% of them uses them as psychological coaches to cope with online loneliness. So EI has evolved from information tool into relationship technology. And that brings us to a new emerging question. Research suggests that many teenagers are beginning to use AI companions not only for information, but also for emotional support and personal conversation. AI is gradually moving from information to relationship. And throughout history, these relationships have been built through family, teachers, friends, communities, and institutions. And today, AI is entering that ecosystem of trust that doesn't necessarily replace those relationships, but it certainly changes them. And that's why we should pay attention. This is where my reflection begins. The question is not whether AI is good or bad. Technology itself is neither. The real question is, what happens when trust gradually shifts toward AI? That's not only a technology question, it's also a social question and ultimately a democratic one. So AI is no longer helping us perform tasks, it's increasingly helping shape how we learn, connect, and build trust. Trust is also how societies make decisions, small and big ones. That's why this conversation is not only about AI, but it's also about democracy, right? Democracy, trust is also how society makes decisions. So large decision, smaller decision, every democracy depends not only on their institution, but also depends on citizens who can think critically, citizens who can ask questions, informations, build trust wisely, engage respectfully with different perspectives, and exercise independent judgment. Those capacities are not something we can download, right? They are learned in class, in libraries, in community organizations, families, and increasingly through our interactions with AI. That means preparing for AI also means preparing citizens. So perhaps the next challenge is this. Beyond investing in AI governance, we must also invest in what I call democratic capacity. The human ability to think critically, to deliberate thoughtfully, to build wisely, to build trust wisely, and to choose independently. Because these human capacities will become even more valuable as AI becomes more capable. So preparing for the AI age is not only about building smarter technologies, it's about strengthening the human capacity, the relationships, and the institution to allow the democracy to flourish. The survey tells us where AI is today. Our responsibility is to prepare Canada for where AI is going next. Because in the end, the future of AI depends on technology, but the future of democracy depends on us. Thank you, and I hope that I made it on the time that was allowed to me. And sorry.
It's all good, Ines. Merci beaucoup. C'était très intéressant. So, maintenant, c'est à la période des questions. On peut répondre en anglais ou en français. It's questions or observations. Chloe, I believe they're going to come through the chat, right?
Yep. Through the Q&A function, we already have some questions. If you guys are ready, we can go ahead.
Sure.
So the first one is, I find that speaking about AI as a blanket term is causing muddled conversations that are fueled by emotional responses. There's a big difference between dedicated translation tools and Gen AI chatbots, for example. There's also a big difference between using a small downloaded LLM on your computer and relying on a cloud-based chatbot provided by big tech. Thanks for pointing this out at points throughout the presentation. Question is, how would you go about ensuring the nuance required to truly explore this area is surfaced, addressed in academic circles?
Wendy?
Sure. I think that's an excellent question, and it's really one that is very critical to research. For example, in looking at AI adoption in SMEs, I referenced the Stats Canada survey, which asked if you use AI in the production of goods or services, and it's around 20%. BDC did a survey and asked SMEs if they use AI, and it was around 36% when they said, do you use this tool, this tool, this tool, this tool? It was over 50%. So the way in which AI is defined has a huge impact on everything from how we understand the current extent of adoption or use, because in fact, pretty well anyone who uses Google or uses Microsoft now arguably is using AI, which is very different, as you point out, between some of the specialized applications. So being very clear about the definitions is absolutely critical, both to understanding adoption, but also understanding when we're talking about AI literacy. What are we talking about when we're talking about deep AI skills to build tools? What are we talking about? And when we're talking about skills for AI adoption, what does that mean? So something we're very preoccupied with, particularly at the Future Skills Center. And thanks for raising the question. I can't say that I have a solution other than always insisting that people explain what they're talking about.
Chloe, next.
All right. So the next question is, if you can't track where okay. So Jack, this was, I believe, in reference to when you had mentioned that you asked AI about how many people disclose AI. I think this was around the same time. The question is, if you can't track where the Gen AI got that answer, why do you feel it's significant enough to even include in your presentation, remeasuring the extent of use and perceptions around who's doing most of the work?
Well, only to the extent that a lot of people are doing that, right? They're consulting AI to answer all kinds of questions, a whole range of things. Even if whether I can track the source or not, I have something that's not done with AI, that is to say the survey, which is about AI. So I want to try to do some comparison because it's very hard to get any good estimate. And I want to see if AI was engaging in any hallucination a term which also needs to be defined, right, around this particular issue. So it was simply just an exercise to see whether it aligned. It would have been good to actually probe the sources further to the extent they can be probed. So the point's well taken on that. But I think it's going to the source of the proverbial challenge is I think still a useful exercise.
All right. And then regarding AI use in language learning, while many survey respondents indicate they believe their own AI use helps their language learning, is there other research that gives us information about whether AI use actually helps or impedes language learning?
I can start with an answer to that. I don't know if Ines wants to add or Wendy wants to add into that. I mean, again, the survey is based on perceptions. There's a lot more research that needs to be done in that area. Part of my experience it contributes to the view that it may become a disincentive for people over time because they think that they can just get everything translated. And if they can get everything translated, what's the point of learning the other language? That would be really horribly unfortunate. But I think there's that risk. I think it's a bit early at this point to draw any definitive conclusions about what direction this is going in because language learning is a process and I think we're seeing considerably greater use of AI AI in this case there's of course it's Google Translate, it's DeepL, there are a lot of tools that are translation tools, right, that are part of machine learning, and now it's becoming increasingly something that's being taken up by private sector, public sector. I'm hearing it at every meeting I have these days when I'm speaking to people in government. They're saying they're increasing with respect to translation, moving to those translation tools. So we'll have to see over time. Very hard to say what the impact on learning is. I think it's sort of those people who feel positively about the technologies are probably going to be inclined to say, yes, it's helping me in terms of language learning, right? So whether it's actually helping them or not would have to be meaningfully tested with some real exam, if you like, about whether their skills before and after are improving or not improving. But the thing we'll need to monitor over time is whether this is going to be something that does indeed contribute to language learning, which would require some hard tests about language skills, or it becomes disincentive, which is a high risk because a lot of people who at certain sort of stages in life who don't want to learn the other language may see this as a way of saying, hey, I don't need it. I can just have it translated by technology X. I don't know, Ines, if you want to add anything, or Wendy, but that'd be my preliminary sort of observation.
I definitely agree, Jack, with the fact that we need more studies to be able to conclude either it helps or it doesn't. But on the other hand, what I would say more from the field, if the objective of learning a language is inclusion, is being able to communicate and be included in a community. In fact, using AI definitely supports your self-confidence and gives you that needed little emotional boost so that you can walk towards the other person and engage into a conversation. And by that perspective, we do not have a quantitative mathematical evaluation of how much you improve or you improve your language skills, but it definitely boosts your confidence to move forward the other person and start a conversation or be in a conversation, which is the overall aim of learning a language.
Yeah, and I would just add, I absolutely believe that we should not that we should improve our efforts to teach people the official languages. And there have been horrifying studies that suggest, our Auditor General in Ontario said you'd learn more English driving taxi than sitting in some of the English language training classes. So we have a lot to account for, in my view, in terms of failures around helping people learn the language. But to Inez's point, we did, when you look at the research, which is quite horrifying, many people exclude immigrants from employment because they say it's communication skills or cultural understanding or whatever. When you actually look at the data, it shows there is no relationship between employment and language capacity, because so many of the decisions around hiring have nothing to do with objective criteria. So I would say, AI is a tool, and we do have to be careful. We know that people can't spell anymore because we're so dependent on spell checkers. So that would be an example of how a tool has undermined skill development. But on the other hand, if AI can help people get in the door, if AI can help people navigate services and supports, if AI can help people build relationships, develop confidence, and so on, those are critical, critical, critical things in terms of improving opportunities and integration. So I think we need more data, and we need to be cautious and mindful of what the risks are, but not hold back because of the obvious opportunities.
Great, thank you. The next question is more of a comment, but you may have responses. The issue is nowadays companies are sending you to review your resume and compare it to AI. So they're forcing you to use it or you won't qualify for any job.
I'm not sure. I'll jump in on that. I'm not sure that's actually true because some employers actually now recognize that so much is being generated. So many people who are applying for jobs are using AI to generate their resumes, their cover letters, and so on. I think they're actually starting to discount things that previously, if someone had a beautifully written cover letter and really seemed to have thought about what the job was and so on. I think some of those things are now being discounted because people understand a lot of stuff is AI generated. And I see it, I feel this could be an overstatement, but I feel I have a bit of an AI antenna. I can usually identify slop based on, just the use. Every time I see someone's put a bio together about me and it says esteemed Wendy Cukier, I'm pretty sure they've used AI because that's not really a word that we would normally use, especially not associated with me. So I think some people um, do recognize when something has been AI generated, but it is getting so sophisticated, it's getting harder and harder and harder to tell. So I think, again, it can cut both ways. I do think that a lot of immigrant supporting organizations, including programs we run, are starting to rely on tools to help people craft resumes, cover letters, prep for interviews, and so on, using AI enabled tools. But I think the use of AI by many employers is now, it's basically AI talking to AI, and humans are being excluded in some cases, especially when it's large employers. And so, in my mind, the shift is going to be much more towards competency based assessments where people actually have to come in a room and do something, not perform in an interview, because again, that's not an objective way of assessing people, but actually do something that is required for the job. And from my point of view, those kind of competency based assessments are far more valuable either than a beautifully written resume and cover letter or an interview where people can be whatever you want them to be. So I think the whole space is being transformed very rapidly.
Jack, Ines, we'll move on to the next question.
Yep, do it.
All right. Actually, this one I believe is for Ines. It was during your presentation. The question is wondering what age group for the teenager statistics. Is it just 13 to 19 or specifics within that age group?
I have to go back to specify it, but the focus on the article was for between 15 and 30. But I can check and write back to the person that they leave you their emails, and I can even give the link to the study that's available online.
Okay. We also had a question from Trevor Swan, which is what was the accuracy of the survey? I'm assuming this is in relation to Jack and Wendy's
So it's done by a
presentation.
reputable firm called Leger Marketing, and it's a web panel with a probabilistic margin of error. The 1,700 respondents, as Wendy indicated, the margin of error for an equivalent telephone survey would be about 2.9 points, 19 times out of 20. So it's in keeping with the standards of national surveys done by all the survey companies, basically. So it's hard to sort of find problems with the methodology in this case. So it's not a convenient sample. In other words, it's a nationally based sample that's done through a web panel.
Okay. Next
Yeah.
question. How is AI helping women cope with isolation and lack of social connections? Perhaps
I'll leave that
Ines.
to Wendy or Ines.
Yeah, speaking
I
more
would
about the
say there's
social
more
connection
research, a lot more
aspect.
research needs to be done in that area, right? I've been reading about it. A lot more research needs to be done in that area. There's a lot of observations being made about that, and it's an important issue, obviously. So
Yeah, I think I would echo that. I just want to share a little anecdote because I think of myself as fairly I won't say neutral, no one's neutral, but I have never been someone who has been a technology enthusiast. I often say it won't happen, it's not going to be adopted. The capacity of the technology is not an indication of how it will transform society and so on. With AI, I actually feel the opposite, that we're really underestimating its impact. And an older woman that I know who I was working with on a W20 initiative said, we want to use Perplexity for research. And I don't trust anything to do research other than people. I trust AI to help synthesize things and clean up the language, but I would never rely on AI to use research. So I was playing around with it to try to judge how good it was compared to humans. And during the course of it, I started asking it questions. So I said, for example, if you were a human, what would you look like? And then I asked it, if you were human, would you identify as a man or a woman? And I asked it, and then it talked to me, and then I responded. And I came out of that interchange absolutely horrified, horrified beyond speech, because many people think humans, the secret sauce is social and emotional intelligence, right? And that's why we're always going to be important and the machines aren't. This thing read me better than anyone I have ever interacted with, gave me answers in a way, in a tone with the right level of chattiness, friendliness, humor, quirkiness, that I came out of that thinking I would rather talk to you than most of the people I know in my life. Why I was terrified is because, on the one hand, that argues for great potential applications in coaching, counseling, wayfinding, tutoring. You know, AI would be a better tutor than me, more patient, available 24/7, knows more than I do, et cetera, et cetera. But also the potential risks in terms of misrepresentation, radicalization, suicide ideation, and. And when I was at the last UN meeting, they talked about sycophancy as being one of the characteristics of AI that makes it so attractive. And I asked the AI about it, and it said, well, in human interaction, you're worried about what you want to communicate and how you're going to communicate to the other person. I only care about what you want. And so I think that there is a real potential for AI to address our needs. Like I said, like I would rather talk to this thing than most of my friends, on the one hand, but the absolute horror that that could create if it's used for evil rather than for good. So thank you for raising the question. We need more research, but if people have not experimented with the more sophisticated paid applications and started trying to evaluate this stuff, please don't tell us that humans surpass AI in terms of social and emotional intelligence, because this thing was terrifying. Sorry.
Thank you, Wendy. It
Oh,
is
okay.
12:59, so I'm not sure we have time for another question unless we want to go a few minutes over, Jack.
I'm not in a position to do that. I got a 1 o'clock meeting, unfortunately, but if others wish to continue, by all means. So
Can we just have
What I was
Ines's response to the last question, please?
sure.
Thank you, Wendy. All what I wanted just to quickly add is in the surveys that are related to youth, when it comes to Europe, a lot of them declare that they feel more maybe more favorable and more understood by the AI companions other than their own friends. But since the question was mainly asked towards women, I think what we should keep in mind is AI can help women move from isolation to participation. For women who face language barriers, social isolation, or limited access to services, AI can increase confidence, support learning, and open pathways to employment and community engagement. So I think technology can open doors, but it's the community who helps people walk through it. So it's really a tool. We really need to keep in mind it's a tool, but it goes hand in hand with the community and with citizens who help each other to stay connected to real human interactions, if that helps.
Thank you so much, Ines. Jack, would you
I
like to
just
conclude?
wanted to,
Oh, sorry, go
sorry, I
ahead.
just
Go ahead.
wanted to add, we have a lot of questions that we weren't able to answer, but we can take those offline and put the
Yeah.
answers together and share them with the follow-up documentation. So apologies.
So thank you very much to both Ines and to Wendy. This is a beginning, I think, of a much broader conversation, which we hope to engage you in the near future again, and hopefully we'll have more findings, more research to share, and more insights developed further. There are a lot of questions that were raised here, both directly and indirectly. So my thanks to you, thanks to everyone who participated. And we'll hopefully see you all soon. Merci infiniment pour votre participation. Merci à les co-panélistes et on vous voit sous peu, j'espère, dans l'avenir. Bye bye.
Merci, Jack.
Merci.
Merci, Wendy. Bye.